So I'm Paul Rodrigue. I'm a teacher here at Vermont Insight. Welcome, welcome.
Sorry, we're just part of the show.
That's okay. And with me is Petey Mitchell, co-owner of Mitchell-Giddings Art Gallery here, and our guest, David Hinton. David is a kind of a literary and spiritual hero of mine. I'm a little nervous being up here with him, honestly. But it wasn't always that way. Back in around 2012, when he published Hunger Mountain, I read a review of the book in Shambhala Sun, I think it was. And it kind of fell flat with me, honestly. I read it and thought, okay, so it sounds like a version of what Thoreau did, and there's been a lot of books like that. So, and I like Thoreau, so I can't imagine that, it's going to compete.
You can only get better.
Thank you.
Did you say that?
And some months later, while I was up at the at our meditation center, it used to be up at Solar Hill, Mary Mathias was there, and I saw she had a copy of this book, Hunger Mountain. And so I got curious, and I asked her what she thought of the book. And she just handed it to me and said, you know what, this book is so good, I bought 4 copies, and I'm giving them out to friends. It wasn't long after that we combined forces with our friend Rose to create the David Hinton book study group here in Brattleboro. And that lasted for many years. It lasted until the pandemic, really. And we went through lots and lots of his books. Existence, Mountain, Home. We even read his translation of the I Ching, Shuangzi. And we got our rhythms down well enough where every time that David came out with a new book, we were ready for him. So when Petey Mitchell last year came to me and said, I've been reading David Hinton, and I think we should bring him to Brattleboro, I jumped at the chance to collaborate with her. So today's kind of a dream come true for me. Yeah. So we've got 2 hours, and this is how it will play out, I hope, I think. David's going to talk for about 30 minutes or so about his latest book, Orient. After that, Petey and I will be engaged in a conversation with him for about another half hour or so. And then we're going to open the floor up to questions from you. So I'd ask that you wait until then, save your questions until that it's not the last half hour, it's the third half hour. The last half hour or so will be saved for some mingling, book purchasing, book signing. And Ruth from Antidote Books has graciously offered to serve as our bookseller, so she'll be here with the books. And she's going to have more than just Orient, but I don't remember all the different volumes that she'll have, but it'll be a good chance to purchase books that you don't have of David's. So with that, I think that's enough. Petey, am I forgetting anything?
Nope, you did a great intro.
Thank you.
Oh, and there's a bathroom, there's a loo.
So yeah, this is a new book. It's, well, first I'm happy to be here. I live north of Montpelier, and I always think, well, if I didn't live here, I would want to live in Brattleboro, Putney and Brattleboro. So you're lucky to be here, and I'm glad to join you for an afternoon. So this book is sort of in 2 parts, and it's about walking out to a kind of Anasazi ruin site in the southwest twice. Each part is 1 walk. First one summer solstice, second one winter solstice. And then they sort of operate differently. The first one is sort of about I don't want to get deep into philosophy. The first one's sort of about the I, this I, and sort of the clarity of sort of mirror deep, empty mind seeing, and the philosophical ramifications of that, which I talk about in a bunch of books. And the second one is more about living with the sort of spontaneous, selfless energy of the cosmos. So those are the two, as it happens, they didn't really plan this, but this is just how I operate, I guess. But those are the two fundamental dimensions of Chan Buddhist sort of practice and awakening, is sort of selfless, empty mind clarity, where once you've stripped everything out of consciousness and it's just empty mind, there's emptiness looking at the world, then you kind of become the world. There's no distinction between you and the world. That's one side, and that's sort of the quiet side. And the other side is the wild side, which is to just like move through life and even beyond life as part of the transformation of things. Like when you die, it's just, well, you'll hear this, it's just folding back into the transformation and try to live with that same energy. So you see that all through Chinese culture, all through poetry, Chan Buddhism, Taoism, painting, calligraphy. Those are the two like fundamental energies. And somehow that's ended up in how this book is, so I don't know how. So I'm just going to read this for 20 minutes or so. And it might be a little too intense for just an ordinary afternoon in Brattleboro, but then we'll start talking and maybe decompress a little. Okay. Desert, sky, sagebrush, sun, ruins, wasp, sight, how wondrous that the world is open inside me, all this light and space somehow mirrored wide open inside me. Desert, sky, sagebrush, sun, ruins, wasp. Ridgeline scrawl distances, cottonwood, sunquick lizard. Experience defines us. It makes us what we are. Places wandered and people known, books read and ideas pursued, the events of our lives. Experience is narrative, history, story, what books are normally about. Story is how we define ourselves as human, how we know ourselves. And the singular stories of our lives make us each unique individuals. So it makes sense that people are interested in experience. And sight, in and of itself, is so altogether immediate and empty that there seems nothing to notice, nothing to think through and understand. But it's miraculous, all this light and space mirrored wide open inside us. Miraculous and fundamental. Something prior to the definitions of experience and story, something we are more entirely even than we are ourselves. Looking for the least possible definition and story, for sight's most expansive emptiness and all the ravishing depths it reveals, I set out into horizon-wide desert, follow a sun-baked trail across dry washes and uplands, rattlesnake keeping cool in pinyon shade, passing petroglyphs of bighorn sheep and cougar, moon and stars etched on clean sandstone walls beneath the mud nests of cliff swallows that enliven the air with their sleek flight. Occasional lightning-haunted clouds and sprinkles of rain drift in blue skies. And when I reach the village abandoned 1,000 years ago, I begin wandering desert distances and ancient ruins, wallstones tumbled and scattered, the edge where the last remnant of human self-definition is feathering away into everything else. It's bewildering. What am I, this empty and mirror deep And where am I amid these desert distances outside, stretching away inside? It's summer solstice, day long with light and all its clarities. I wander and soon begin gathering stones one by one. I settle stone beside stone on earth, laying a foundation, beginning to build a small cairn, to orient. Circling hawk, red tail, sunflash, deadwood shadow twist. At the very heart of things is the eye, and the natural history of the eye begins in the birth throes of this cosmos, for the first appearance of stars open space and light and the visible, the elemental dimensions of consciousness. After several star generations, our planet was formed, cooling and evolving until eventually water appeared, hydrogen created during the original cosmic expansion, combining with oxygen, an element forged in the explosive furnaces of dying stars. Water formed mirrored pools in hollows on the planet's primeval surface. And in these pools, the cosmos turned toward itself for the first time on this planet. It became aware of itself, awakened to itself in that mirrored opening, deep as all space and light, deep as the visible itself. Image-forming eyes evolved, and the cosmos was awakened to itself once again, conjuring its vast dimensions inside us, creating the opening of consciousness, its empty and exquisite deep sky depths. Lichen, orange, blue-green, yellow, red. The tissue of existence in its elemental molecular structure is opaque, and so the eye is truly miraculous. Little water pocket fold, all empty clarity. It's a sight where the utter opacity of matter is somehow open to itself, mirroring itself. The eye at the very heart of things, the eye at the very heart of things is the eye. What great good fortune, here in this desert empty of story and definition. There is no difference anywhere between myself and these horizon-wide desert distances. Free of myself, sight caressing things, edges and textures, forms and colors and distances. The eye alive at the very heart of things. It's like nothing so much as flight, light-drenched flight. Basalt, lichen-stained, orange, skylit sky. There's almost nothing left, nothing of the village that once thrived here. Only a few remnants of wall remain, more absent than present. All that carefully laid stone, shelter mostly emptied away into ruins, tumbled back to earth, and scattered across desert. It's the edge where human order sifts away into everything else. And it's the perfect place to forget what I am and everything that defines me, all the experiences and ideas, stories and assumptions. Forgetting and forgetting, I return to sight in and of itself. I wander at the edge of the human here in these ruins, at the beginning of the human, before even the earliest story and art, idea and explanation. All of that must have begun in some primordial act of orientation, a first cairn perhaps, a few stones piled tentatively up. That first cairn began to define a place, a human place, in relation to everything around it. Rain, desert gust, pumice grit earth, fritillary. Forgetting and forgetting, it's easy to return to the clarity of that first cairn. I carry a few more ruin stones, nestle them onto those foundation stones, 1 over 2, 2 over 1, and it begins to orient this first cairn of mine. It begins to mean everything around it, for where does it end? Its extent includes all of this desert landscape, this topography. When we speak of things, when we name them, they become objects in an elsewhere somehow separate from us. But a cairn says nothing, creates no elsewhere. It keeps things whole, like sight. I pile a few ruin stones slowly. Here at the beginning, keeping things whole, I orient. Ridgeline snow distances, Apache plume, red threadwander fluff. How exquisite when things fall apart. No idea who I am, no idea where. Ruins, ruins mirror deep, opening such emptiness. Empty mind, empty sight, empty lifetime. Suddenly, the moon lofts huge over a mesa rim horizon here in this emptiness. Midday heat ripples air, wind whispers through, late light slants through, stars wheel through this emptiness. Days and nights and whole lifetimes stream through unscathed and empty, empty. Ocotillo spine wander, pinion cone scatter, petroglyph wings. I gather a few more stones, settle them next to each other, on top of each other. Mute and elemental, a cairn orients, marks the way. It says nothing, nothing about the landscape it orients around itself. Distances of desert and mountain, it orients and yet remains empty, for it is about everything other than itself. This self we each are in our everyday routine, this I here in the grammar, it creates the illusion that I inhabit an isolate interiority, that sight is a kind of inside looking out to an outside. It's lonely, that breach between me and everything else. But here in the actual moment of seeing, I can't find that self I am anywhere. That inside we assume looks out to an outside, and I can't find that loneliness. What I find instead is simply awareness open to the world, awareness like a mirror filled with the world, no self, no subject, no inside. Cairn and sight, they seem perfect, seem complete and still and whole, celebrating existence itself, the depths of sheer existence. These depths open their distances mirror deep through me, and I am nowhere right here where they open, nowhere, and beginning to orient. So that's a sample of part 1. I should have said this is called Orient, 2 walks at the edge of the human, so that's where I'm trying to get. And it's made with sort of fragments that sort of accrue. They're not really there's not a linear development, they just sort of accrue. Now I'll read a few pages from part 2, and you'll see it works differently, a little more incantatory and energetic. Ruins are aftermath, that murderous furnace at the heart of change laid quietly bare in the wind, and aftermath. Things get simple here. So this is winter solstice, right, part 2. Things get simple here. I am this empty opening where the cosmos gazes out at itself. Sincerity deep, light years deep. It's exquisite and terrifying, all this emptiness inside and out and moving. I gaze out from ruins across desert expanses, perfecting emptiness until I can't find whatever I am that dies. Dwelling nowhere, clinging to nothing, depending on nothing, I wander without myself, as Zhuangzi says in my voice, boundless and free through the selfless unfolding of things, free even of death itself. Unborn, empty, what is there to die? When death comes, it comes as the great transformation simply unfurling its next possibility, carrying everything I am away, making me so much more than whatever it is I am now. It's exquisite and terrifying. It's a kind of flight. And because that great transformation is inexhaustible, I am in this flight inexhaustible and moving, unborn and empty and always moving on, and clear skies ahead on. I am the question desert poses, and I the answer. Mountains breathe my breaths, sky thinks my thoughts. I feel dead if I'm not moving. I am hunger through, and never satisfied. I keep moving beyond myself, vanishing through Earth's traceless transformations. I am alive and empty and moving, footsteps empty, heartbeat empty, breath empty, thought and memory empty with the beauty of empty, everything I am and ever hope to be empty. Empty mind, empty. Where on earth am I going? Empty. Say it, empty. Even with espresso and dark chocolate, nothing, not empty. Out of breath with empty. Living empty, dying empty. Desert distances and rain and ruins, ruins empty. The great transformation empty with that same beauty of empty. Empty and moving, always unfurling further and further through. Villages and cities are bombed into ruins, and I keep moving, moving. I accept with my whole body surrender and abandonment. There is no other choice. And what does it even mean, empty? Empty, like flight, like wings lifting me into flight, and wild with that flight. Why not say it? Empty, grain of salt, empty. The sun sets among 1,000 peaks. Night comes, planetary shadow settling into ruins, and stars rise. Winter solstice, darkness where turning seasons end and begin again. Still point open to planetary night. Nothing moves. I can almost hear it now, that evolutionary clock's chromosomal tick, tick, tick. 3 new amino acids every million years. 3 new mutations redefining species, adapting them to changing conditions. New possibilities against the darkness of extinction. Darkness of this year-end solstice night. Darkness, winter stars drift light years deep in the eye, the mirror deep eye. I bow, offering wing to wind, mountain to cloud, life to death, offering life. I bow first and last, offering rain's drowse to the land, meat to beak, spring to summer. I bow lichen to rock, gravity to space, vulva to tongue, and womb to child, earth to sky, and sky to earth, offering silence to silence. I bow. I exact each sight, fathoming the eye's mirror deep clarity, occurrence, instance after vanishing instance, each one another silent cry of the heart. Tick, tick, tick. All that occurrence comes to rest here in this solstice dark. Nothing moves. Stars grain the darkness. Nothing moves. Then lost among sagebrush and gathering solstice dark, desert grass gold, the year's final flicker, flares where the ancestral ways continue unchanged, and the hearts tick, tick, tick. Meaningless as a raven taking flight, huge black wings pulsing, pulsing. Meaninglessness, my winged meaning. It was wondrous enough as coyotes' mischief, or sun and moon losing themselves in the dark lovemaking of solar eclipse. But in empirical fact, the birthplace of stars is now always everywhere, a quantum particle burst blossoming out and flaring starlight, where the mysterious fabric of gravity tightens. The more we know about it, the more wondrous it becomes, and we can see through knowing to the question that remains. Being, shadowy being, somehow ablaze with itself here, even after thinning and cooling for nearly 15 billion years. No words for it all. I keep stacking ruins into the simplest of cairns, a few tumbled wall stones on stones, tick, tick, tick. I'll scatter this cairn back into ruins soon enough, ruins scattering into desert. But for now, it seems perfect, seems complete and still and whole. We can see through knowing to the question that remains. Being, shadowy being, somehow ablaze with itself here, even after thinning and cooling for nearly 15 billion years. Being, all starlit shadow here in this solstice dark. Being, meaning at root, Orient dwelling, origin dwelling. I gaze into it, finding that empty mind my ancient teachers showed me, a tranquil mirror all mystery and shadow. I ask only myself of myself, no answer. No answer. Planetary night deepens into this solstice dark, this hinge between destruction and creation. Everything returns to rest here, all occurrence death-drawn, that it may begin again, that it may continue. Aging galaxies vanish and nothing moves. The 10,000 things crowding these passing seasons vanish. Cities, civilizations, whole ecosystems vanish without a trace here, empty. Everything returns to rest here in this ruins moment. It's inexhaustible, this onslaught of occurrence vanishing into occurrence here, into forgetfulness whole. And I forget the same way, things vanishing relentlessly into me, slipping so easily from memory. Rattlesnake in shadow last summer, the ancient words with their timeless truths, the unspeakable histories we must not forget, we must not. Nothing moves here, where occurrence begins and ends. It's home to all things, hermitage my sage ancient teachers inhabit. They left the gate wide open, invited me in, and now I'm here with them, listening to the shadow between each breath and the next. I gaze out into this solstice night, perfecting a place, a moment, until it is only shadow looking into shadow. Empty, mirror deep, I open a place for the stars, I orient. So that's a little sample. It makes me nervous reading that long straight, or even talking that long straight. So I'm going to read to kind of undo all that talk, a couple of quiet poems from another book, a book of poems called Desert. So these are my two desert books. So these are very short. I think I'm going to read them twice each. This one has a cairn in it, so. And words, like all those words we just heard. After a lifetime of words, it's empty desert that understands. I walk all afternoon in a dry canyon, leave one last word, little cairn marking the way, vanishing there. Come. After a lifetime of words, it's empty desert that understands. I walk all afternoon in a dry canyon, leave one last word, little cairn marking the way, vanishing there. Come. This one has eyes, like part one of Orient. The desert sees itself through many brilliant eyes, whole histories of eyes, antelope eyes, hummingbird, fox, lizard, vulture. It knows itself so perfectly by now. I wonder why it keeps talking like this. The desert sees itself through many brilliant eyes, whole histories of eyes, antelope eyes, hummingbird, fox, lizard, vulture. It knows itself so perfectly by now. I wonder why it keeps talking like this. And one last one. It's nice when things are perfect. The day is light now. Presence inescapable in its vast presence. I can't say much less than this. I'm awake. It's nice when things are. It's nice when things are perfect. The day is light now, presence inescapable in its vast presence. I can't say much less than this. I'm awake. It's nice when things are. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. I just wanted to give a little tiny intro about my experience. In 2018, I read your article in Art in America, The Tao of Painting. Also attending your lecture at Marlborough College the same year, I was transfixed and transformed by the two fundamental elements you described, absence and presence. Then I have a question. As you write so eloquently about the beauty and reverence for place, space, and time, walking among ruins, artifacts of long ago, I'm intrigued that you share the thoughtful creation of a cairn, an artifact of your time. I was here among the ruins. What was that for you? How was that for you? Creating your space, creating and orienting with a cairn.
Well, I don't know. I guess I was thinking more of cairn, just how cairns work in the world, because all cultures build cairns. What?
I was just asking what a cairn.
Oh, cairn is, like you might see on a trail, if you're hiking on a trail and you see a pile of rocks, and it's like saying, this is the trail, you're on the right place, or, people build them for all kinds of reasons, to mark a grave, I don't know. And just how they work. and I could because I love them. And I actually worked for, I don't know, 5 or 10 years building dry stone walls and terraces and things to make a living. So I have this real feel for stone and really love it. And somehow I started thinking about cairns and how elemental they are. They are, like I said in one of those passages I read, it's like a very, maybe a very primordial way that humans oriented. It's like marking a place. Like if you leave wherever you are and you're going out very far, you might want to know your way back, and you might put little cairns around. And anyone who's hiked out in places that you don't really know where you are, but they are traveled, cairns can be very reassuring. You say, oh, I know, I'm where other people were at least. And then slowly I was thinking about how empty they are, because they're really just pointing elsewhere. They have no content of their own, they're just pointing out, and that's what really the eye does. And I don't know.
And they just are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Pete, can I jump in here?
yeah.
What struck me as I was listening to you, David, is how your words were kind of inviting us to step away from that which we normally orient with. Our own stories. Like elsewhere in Orient, you spent a page or two talking about shelter, and including the shelter of our stories.
Yeah.
Right. And so as I was listening, I actually wondered if you maybe worry sometimes in how people receive what you're writing, because you're inviting us to step away from everything we kind of hold near and dear, right? Like, and
That's what I like
it's
about
bold.
There might be some cantankerousness in my own nature, but yeah, I don't know why I like just dismantling everything I can, and see what's there. Like Descartes is really pretty much full of shit, but I remember doing philosophy and thinking how nice, and Husserl later, how great this idea of a reduction, of just trying to strip away everything that's contingent and see what you've got. And then when I really started digging into Chan, I don't know, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, something, and then I did a series of books about Chan. Well, what I realized was that that's the absolute essence of Chan and Taoism too. Well, Chan is just an extension of Taoism. I don't know if these words mean anything to you, but anyway, the ancient Chinese Chan Buddhism, what became Zen Buddhism was originally Chan in China, where it was invented. But the most essential thing about Chan is that it's about dismantling all of your mental structures and then see what's there. And it's spectacular to just get rid of all that stuff, and then it just kind of blows you wide open. Yeah.
Well, and no, that's certainly where I want to go. but like how you use the word unborn in there, right? Which is common in.
I was trying to pick out
Zen.
things, and yeah, that word unborn gets built up earlier, and I realized I shouldn't have included that in one. Anyway.
No,
okay, let's talk
well,
about
what's helpful for me about your writing is it actually invites us into a way of thinking about a term like unborn, which shows up and often is used in this kind of esoteric way, and you ground it in a reality, right? As we kind of strip away the layers that we make up ourselves with, would it be fair to say that what we're left with is this awareness which wasn't born? Is that where you're going, or are you going somewhere else?
Well, yeah, unborn is an old Chan thing. And it actually connects with the eye, because, and I think a way I can't remember what I say anymore, but I think a way I describe it is, in our sort of language, is I was talking about how the origin of consciousness, or the I, is actually the beginning of the cosmos, and there's the evolution of the cosmos and star generations, and then there's, on our planet, there's the idea of ponds that are mirroring. That's a kind of awareness, and then slowly image-forming eyes evolved. So just remember, all of this is just the cosmos evolving, right? It's the cosmos evolves the planet, and then the planet's evolving water, ponds of water, and then image-forming eyes in simple animals, and then animals eventually, mammals evolve, and then humans. And so it's quite literally true. Oh God, did I just lose unborn? It's quite literally true that we are the cosmos looking out at itself, right? And that means when we always think of ourselves as somehow, we have this dichotomy, and we think we're born out of the world, we're born, and then we're going to die back into the world. Maybe that's a way we tend to, but we're not. And that spiritual practice is this in ancient China. A simple version of it is, we're born as humans, and we're sort of separate from natural process, and so the goal of spiritual practice is to reintegrate us into natural process. And so that's like, and when we die, then we go back into natural process. And that's one level of that. But if you go down one level, you're always already unborn. You were never born out of that, because we are the cosmos looking out at itself. We're the cosmos thinking itself, to use modern terminology. So that's, I think, how unborn works. And that's a certain level of insight that's pretty challenging, and it's definitely part of Chan. And it's sort of both halves of Orient are sort of playing with that idea of unborn. Unborn in part one more because it's this empty eye, the cosmos gazing out at itself. And the second, unborn, because everything I do is this energy of the cosmos. We're not ever separate from the cosmos. I mean, in the West, it's radical separation, because the Western tradition is there's spirit and there's matter, and there's soul and there's heaven and earth. There's this whole dualistic structure in which we are fundamentally, ontologically separate from the world around us in terms of consciousness. So unborn is to completely get rid of that. China had that, but not as fundamental and radical. But they still felt it, and that's another long.
That's why we have you here.
I had another question.
Okay.
I'm not even sure if it's a question or a statement. How you're filtering visual stimulus while walking, exploring. Artists compose by deleting, editing. You compose a narrative, not unlike painters. It says, I can't wait. I don't know how many people have read Orient yet, but it's absolutely incredible with how he is delving into the intimacy of every moment of walking in the desert. It had a huge effect on me. Painting landscapes or abstraction, an immediate form of spiritual practice, of merging one's consciousness with the cosmos. During creation, brush to surface, the stream of thought becomes silent, empty mind. And that was just something I thought maybe we could leap into at one point about the creative practice, painting. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we put these particular pieces up. But whether it merges into conversation, I don't know. There's a lot of artists here. Yeah.
We hear from them then. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to say to that. I mean, the first thing I think of is gestural abstraction, which is that energy of the cosmos, made visible, which is Chinese calligraphy is all about that. It's not about, doesn't matter what the words say. It's about that fluid movement as selfless movement of the cosmos. That's 100% of what Chinese calligraphy is about. Well, not 100%, but anyway, it's a lot of what it's about. And people think you can't really, that's the art form that seems so foreign we can't enter it, I think, in the West. But actually, it's just, if you look at Chinese calligraphy, as if you're looking at abstract expressionist painting, it's available. It doesn't matter what the words say.
Really?
Yeah, you don't have to know.
Really?
Yeah, and then I don't know. We were talking about trying to get images, and I could show you Chinese paintings, but it didn't really work. I don't know. I've always. Yeah, I mean, modern post-war, especially American art, was pretty influential on me a long time ago. And I tended to see it through this lens that we're talking about, through a kind of Chan from the beginning. Like, I saw minimalism as this real Chan Zen practice of just stripping all meaning away until you've just got like a line, an edge. And I don't know if I really saw abstract expressionism that way, except that it's all immediate experience. No, you can't really conceptualize. I remember a reviewer writing about Arthur Danto, maybe? Who was it? No. Holland Cotter, writing about Agnes Martinshow at the Guggenheim, and he says, well, if you want to know how to look at paintings like this, you want somebody to tell you, just stand in front of it for a half an hour. That's all you're going to get. You have to stand in front of it. Well, there's something very Chan to me about that. And then there's like Ad Reinhardt that just feels like meditating, looking at, Ad Reinhardt's black, paintings with 9 squares, but you can barely tell the difference. So you're just on this edge of one shade of black to another shade of black and just sinking into it.
I tend to bring a Vermont insight. The lineage is more Theravadan, more the sort of the early school of Buddhism, and that has a heavy emphasis on the gradual training. And so sometimes, when I'm reading your works, I'm receiving it through that lens. And when I think about some of these paintings, and I guess it was Existence, where you spent.
Yeah, all about painting,
right.
Chinese painting.
What comes to me a lot is how, in allowing ourselves, whether we're the painter or the observer of the art, it's challenging our perceptions, our usual perceptive tendencies, right? Like it's almost shocking me out of how my mind is trying to make sense of things. And so I see that often as this kind of gradual training opportunity. Very, a lot of the landscape painting, that's how I often am looking at it now, after having read Existence, that I'm seeing it as an opportunity to kind of practice a different way of thinking.
Yeah, well, I think that's how it's intended. I mean, all the Chinese landscape painters and calligraphers were Chan people, and they thought of painting as practice or teaching, and in the old days, you would stand in front of one for an hour or two with your mind as empty as it could be, and just because in a Chinese landscape painting, it's almost like looking at those elemental energies of the cosmos. Because I don't know if I want to go into the whole thing about it, but you can sort of see the landscape paintings are so full of emptiness, you can sort of see landscape emerging out of emptiness and vanishing back into it, which is the movement of transformation in the cosmos, right? It's all change, appearance, burgeoning forth, living and then disappearing back into this kind of emptiness. And you can see that in Chinese paintings. The landscapes almost always look like they're just coming out of, and the emptiness in those paintings is sky, water, lakes, rivers, and they always built the landscape out of those forms of emptiness. Mist was the other big one, mist and cloud. And they really were left as empty. They weren't like painted over the way the West would have done it. They were just, it's just sort of bare silk or with a slight wash. So, I mean, you can sort of, I mean, that's got a lot of emptiness and then energy in the emptiness. So that's, you know, abstraction working in that realm, but at least for me, that's how I look at it. Yeah.
Right, because there's nothing specifically representational about any of the shapes and,
Right.
yeah.
It's just this, yeah, it's like, what is a painting? It's painting, for me, it's something, like in the world I'm trying to get at in Orient, it's something, you know, beyond words, some kind of cosmic energy or something, or process, or...
That's part of what Dan Weldon is trying to achieve, and I think he does achieve with all of his linear work. It's bringing you into a lot of energy, directing you. It's
Yeah,
not holding still. There's
yeah,
a lot of movement in there.
yeah,
And and then all of the red going off the picture plane.
yeah,
There's a lot of questions. Okay, what's happening there? Why is the artist choosing to do that? And that's a constant. These are all Dan's works too, behind everybody. Because he takes these shapes and shows them to the edge. And okay,
where's it going?
where is he going? And it's fascinating to talk to him about that. Did you want to open it up to any questions having to do?
We've almost, we're at our third half hour.
Woo woo. Okay.
So maybe it would be good to open it up to questions. I don't know if you were ready to jump in. There's something there?
That ship sailed.
Oh.
No, I do have a question. This is more about your art, your processing. When you're these thoughts, when you're experiencing this information, are you engaged in the end product, or are you simply there, experiencing it, and then later recalling what you experienced?
Well, the truth is, I'm not very smart. It's not like I have this experience, and then I go write it like in Orient. It's like I might have it a little bit today, and a little bit in Vermont, and a little bit in France, where a lot of the ruins ideas came to me, because there are places we live in France that have lots of ruined villages. And then I just slowly write it, build it up. You know, a lot of it's built up in the writing. Like that's when the discovery happens. It's not like I go to this place, to this ruins, and there's like revelation, and this whole book is like pours into my head, and I go write it down. No. I get little bits and pieces all over the place, and I slowly put it together.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
I was wondering if you could talk about the role of words in the sense that how much of the emptiness that you experience is because you've spent so many decades thinking in classical Chinese, if it's actually like a pictographic thinking, and is it equally like not thinking in English and in pictures that allows that emptiness? I just feel like there's an onslaught of words in our lives, so the emptiness that you described feels almost inaccessible unless you're exiting English. But is it pictographic or, yeah?
I have a couple of answers. That's a good question. One is, no, I don't think you have to exit English. I mean, that's what meditation is about, is just getting rid of language in your head and letting it Well, okay, let's see. So empty, so yeah, if you sit and meditate, one of the things that happens is if you just sit, at least in Chan meditation, the way I think about it, you sit and it's really just about watching what's happening in your head. So you're sitting and watching, and the first thing you notice is that analytical noise that's going on, which we think is us. You can sit and watch it. So, wow, it's not me at all. I'm over here. I can watch it. Next thing you realize is that it's like just emerging out of emptiness and then it goes through its obsessions, and then it disappears and some new thought comes. And you realize, oh, this train of words in my head operates just like everything else in the world, where things are born out of nothing, they live their lives, and they vanish into nothing. And your thoughts do the same thing. So this is the unborn idea. Right there is the unborn. That is, your thinking, what you think is this self that's kind of separate from everything, actually moves just like, is the same tissue as everything else. But then you wait long enough, and then it sort of fades. You know, your thoughts will slow down, and that's what meditation is about, is getting to the point where you're just in that empty, what for the Chinese would say, or what I would say, that empty source of thoughts, and also source of mountain ranges and, you know, babies and everything else. And then you're outside of the noise. Then you've gotten past it. But you don't have to think that's the goal, because in the end, there's no real difference. You get to the point where there's no real difference between the thinking and the silence, between noise and silence. That was one of the real realization for me. I was reading this commentary to the I Ching, and that's what he said. This is like the 300 CE, and he said, oh, that there's no difference between thoughts and silence. Oh, that's what it's about. Anyway, but you bring up Chinese, and it's true. Chinese, I have been thinking in Chinese for 40 years or something. Classical Chinese, and especially classical Chinese poetry, which is pared down as far as you can. And it's true, it's full of empty space. They don't have much, all the little crap that English needs, like conjunctions and particles. Often doesn't have subjects, often doesn't have verbs, et cetera, et cetera. And that is, that's a pretty radical practice, I think. And when I was learning Chinese, and I don't even think it was even classical Chinese I was learning, but even modern Chinese or spoken Chinese was enough of this, that and it was a super intense thing I was doing. It was a year-long, super intense, full-time, nothing else Chinese. And and it got to the point, I'm a pretty moderate drinker, but it got to the point that I couldn't go to sleep at night without like 3 whiskeys, because I felt like I was doing this intense reorganization of my mind. After a semester or 2, I got over that thing, gratefully. But yeah, the way I do it, a lot of people are in Chinese, I don't think it changes them that much, but I'm so philosophical that I kind of took it seriously. And it does open up some space, yeah. But you don't need it, there's other ways, because you don't want to go learn Chinese.
When you start talking about the first part, when you went to the ruins, it made me think about, I used to teach in Syria, and I used to go to these, what were called the abandoned, or the cities, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were just Roman villages from the 7th century. And when you go to ruins like that are so empty, you want to populate them with people, populate them with, something.
You do want to?
Yeah, well, I think it's natural, but then the longer you stay, the less that happens.
Yeah.
And you realize, well, now it's only me who's here, and nothing else. And that whole thing about, because when you go on a tour of ruins, they fill your head with all kinds of.
Yeah, that's what I liked about ruins. That's what got me started. Just the idea that ruins are where the human is feathering away back out into the earth. Because, you know, people show up, they construct order and shelter and all this stuff, and then whatever happens, and then it all goes back into the transformation of things. And I like being on that edge.
Well, there would be several of us, but after a while, we wouldn't talk to each other.
So you were there, yeah.
We just sort of, everybody went their own way and just was there.
Mhm.
We weren't hypothesizing or anything.
Right.
Like that,
Thank you. I guess I have partly a comment and then a question. The question's based on the comment. The emphasis on the unborn, it seems extremely central. It's primal, it's primary. And we can locate a lot of what we might be looking at in terms of capital R reality or the big S self. I know it in Vedanta, it's a very strong, but that which is born dies, is subject to death. So whether it's a body or a thought, as you were talking about, a thought comes into existence and then it fades away. Emotions, feelings, includes much of the mind. But that which is unborn implies it cannot die. And in that, there's a core of eternity or immortality. The true I, the true self, is the unborn. It's not born. Whatever comes out of that is born, and it may or may not have a separate identity at some point if it begins to identify with its thoughts, feelings, or experiences. And one part of the earlier part of your reading, you were talking about being defined by experience, and I question that there's an inherent duality in that, because it's a separation from the true I. But I don't know exactly to word the question. But
Well, I wasn't saying, I was saying we want to focus on experience, but there is something deeper than that.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to ask a question? You want me to say
Where
something?
the experience comes out of,
Yeah.
or before,
Yeah.
and which is there before the experience and remains after. But so then the question is, well, do we exist in the cosmos, or does the cosmos exist in us? In the terms of the true I, the cosmos must exist within the unborn, not outside of it. Does that make sense? And that's what my question is relating to
Yeah.
Sean, if that comes up in there, if it comes to that point or not, in some way.
Yeah, no, not for Chan or Taoism or me. There is no eternal self, or whatever you're trying to say. There's this kind of eternal self that's unborn, and then there's the contingent born self. But that's not what they're doing. That I think is the duality, because you're saying there's this almost spirit realm that's eternal, and then a non-spirit realm. That's this spirit matter almost thing. That's a dualistic structure, and for Chan, to be unborn is to be 100% through and through, every aspect of consciousness, part of the great transformation. That everything about me is gonna just get folded back into the great transformation. So your real identity for them, your true identity is the great transformation. So when you die, you just become something bigger and bigger and bigger. Not because you exist, not because of self or some kind of essence of me or spirit of me or something, not because it continues to exist, but because it was only one form of the transformation, and now the transformation is going to keep going. So that's my biggest identity. My realest, truest identity is the whole great transformation.
Follow that up with one idea. Duality must exist, otherwise there'd be no creation. The cosmos requires duality to have opposites that we can distinguish between. But that doesn't necessarily make the duality real. It just makes it an appearance.
Well, that's not really duality, those are distinctions. And duality isn't, I mean, the fact that you can say there are two things like yin and yang that interact, that's, well, I mean, I guess you could call that a duality, but usually we talk about duality as, when I talk about it, I'm talking about sort of Western duality, which assumes there are these two fundamentally different ontologically things, like spirit and matter, like heaven and hell. And also it takes so many forms, it's just hidden in everything we do, like language, there's language and there's the world. Like they're two complete ontologically separate things that match the duality between self, spirit, and everything else. But I think for Taoism, Chan, and me, the whole idea is getting past that and realizing, because if we go through that meditation process, you realize, no, there is no self here looking out. There's just the world in me. There's no real distinction. In fact, to come back to your thing with ancient Chinese, in a classical Chinese poem, when they say, you know, I see the sunrise, they don't say I. They just see I, this I. Pictographically, it's just a picture of the eye, and then sun, and then rise, or rise and sun. And if you look in the moment of perception, if you're really seeing, like, there is no self there. So there is, if you really look at what happens in a moment, like I don't know how you can see this easily. I mean, if you meditate, you can see it. But you know, if anything captivates you, if you're sitting in your house and suddenly your child runs in and you didn't know, you thought she was on the other side of the world, but she ran into the room. Suddenly you would be 100% perception right then. And that's the moment you look at consciousness and you say, oh, there's no me there. There's just my daughter in me. Does that make sense? So that's what I'm saying, so that's sort of fundamental, that's what I mean by duality, as opposed to like distinctions or, does that make sense?
I think there's an element of cultural mixture in there that's a bit confusing, but between East and West. But
Yeah, that's what I like the idea of using, you think I still have some Western in me? I like using ancient Chinese to dismantle Western structures, and one of the most fundamental structures, that ontological metaphysical dualism. Yeah.
Can I ask a personal question? I mean, they're all questions, I guess. So you're clearly a pretty deep guy, and then you can, like, by nature of the fact that you've written this book, access a sort of fully embodied state of this being or knowing or understanding, and then you're voicing that. And like, given that that's a state that you can access, what about the rest of your life? Like, how do you think, are you aiming to like be that more, but then like practically how are you going to function in society if you do that? Are you accepting like, oh, this is like a cool thing I can do, kind of like a hobby, and then in other ways I like ground in it in moderation? I don't know, like now that you can access that and you can be there, what do you do with that? Great question.
Yeah. Not a very fair question.
It's not personal.
Well, maybe that's just another little dualism to get rid of. It's the day-to-day shit is just as much part of that unborn living as, doing a week-long session meditating. And I'm not so good at institutions. I don't do week-long meditations. I want it to be in my life. But you're right. You can't, you have to deal with the broken car and all of that, and buying groceries and all that stuff. And so, I don't know what the answer to that is. It doesn't all have to be transcendent, or even most of it's not going to be. It's you know how it works, and you sort of know you're always there. You're sort of always already enlightened. You can't be anything else. So if you're, doing the day-to-day crap, you still are. You don't have to feel it all the time. No one can do that, unless you're a professional. So if you're and these are the people not to trust. If you're like the Zen, the Buddhist center leader, and you have this institution that sets you up there, and that's all you are, is enlightened all day long. Well, then you can sort of do it, but it's kind of artificial. Again, I don't trust that. And that's actually, it's interesting, because in ancient China, for Chan, there was the sort of monastic Chan, and however, it was completely integrated. And let's start with this. There's the whole monastic Chan institution, but it's not separate from intellectual society. It's totally part of it. And then there are, say, the poets and the painters. Well, the poets would sort of be the Chan people who live in the world and deal with the shit, instead of living in a monastery where you can kind of strip all that away. And that's probably how most of us are, right? Not many of us want to go live in, any of us could. You could go live in a Zen monastery or whatever Buddhist monastery you want, and get rid of all that stuff and feel like you're enlightened because you're tranquil all day long. But, but in old China, the Chan people, I think, mixed more than you might think with everyday stuff. And the poets and intellectuals and other people mixed more with the Chan stuff than you would expect. In fact, it was like, if they traveled, and they often did because they were government officials, and they traveled between jobs, and they traveled a lot in ancient China. And when they did, they would stay in Chan monasteries, were like inns. So they would hang out, and even where they lived, they would always be checking in at the local place. Is that an answer? That's a long, rambling answer.
David, listening to your answer, it made me think you've got a little bit of Cold Mountain in you. that character who's at the edge of the monastery, not quite trusting it.
Yeah. He's kind of iconic for that reason, because Chan doesn't trust itself. It doesn't trust any stories, not Buddhist. First thing it wants to dismantle is Buddhism. Second thing it wants to dismantle is Taoism, which is its real source. The last thing it wants to dismantle is itself. That's when he gets started.
Yeah. I think Steve's got a question. Oh, so does Drew. Sorry. Which one? Steve.
Slightly different direction than these questions, more practical.
That was pretty practical.
About the
A little too
writing,
practical.
about the writing process. The very last thing you read, one of the very last lines you read, was something like, I can't write any less.
Mm-hmm.
you can't say any less.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me think about how you have set yourself up with a paradoxical problem.
Mm-hmm.
That as a writer,
Yeah.
one needs to use words, and that when one is writing words about that words are not adequate, there's a paradoxical
Mm-hmm.
place at the bottom of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized that I was very caught by the second half of the book. And the reason that I was caught was because it was during that section that has the word empty again and again and again, and it sounded to me like leaves of grass. It sounded very Whitman-like.
Mm-hmm.
And that what Whitman does there, and it felt like you were doing there, was dispersing the self by putting I again and again and again. You know, there's self here and there's self there, all these things, and that's Whitman's trick, is to disperse himself by being everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I was thinking about this and thinking about the question for you, I realized that although you're right, English has this problem of all the little words that are not necessary in Chinese,
Mm-hmm.
that it has one delightful thing, which is the pun on the word I. And that in the first half of your book, it says I a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way you disperse I in the first half,
Mm-hmm.
is by using the word I-E-Y-E.
Yeah.
And I thought, how does one, as a writer, because I'm trying to write poetry, how does one wrestle with this problem of that if you're trying to write about not self,
Mm-hmm.
how do you use words when the using of the words keeps making I happen?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, that's an old problem, and all the old Chinese poets knew it. They said, they would say, I'm caught in the karma of words. Not that they really believed in karma, but and what's the other thing they say? They say, well, anyway, they sort of know that there's this as long as you're a poet and you're writing poems, you're not there, right? Yeah. Well, how do you think about that? Well, the first thing that I think about is, well, yeah, you're using words to get past words. There's no other way you're going to get past words, really. Even like you were talking about gradual practice, and in Chan, is it a gradual practice and sudden enlightenment? Well, gradual practice is words, but you're using the words to try to get past the words. And since we are stuck with this, meaning-making machine, we don't have any choice. Animals don't have to do this. They're already enlightened. They don't need to use words to get past words. They're just past words. So they're the lucky ones. But then, so you can actually see this in one kind of development in Chinese poetry is people who did these really stripped down poems in the Tang Dynasty, which were just these stripped down imagistic poems that were trying to use words to get past words, to just get to things themselves, an empty mind. And this is all Chan poetry. It's like I was talking about the empty mind mirroring the world, and that's how they tried to make poems. Well, people also realized, a little later, that words and thinking is also another step of understanding. Is essentially part 2 of Orient, is to accept words as the cosmos moving. And maybe I don't have to get past words. It's the energy of the cosmos. I'm already there. I'm unborn. I'm always already enlightened. Whether I'm thinking, whether I'm not thinking, whether I'm taking out the garbage, whether I'm sitting on a meditation cushion. So at that point, in Chinese poetry, there's a lot of poetry that just kind of rambles. And it's playing that game, another game of enlightenment. I'm just finishing a book of a guy who was pretty good at that. That was his thing. And he was 500 years after the people who were doing that real stripped down, empty mind mirroring kind of poetry. So yeah, it doesn't have to be, yeah. You or you? I don't know.
Speaking of words, I think over the years I've made peace with the word emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
But it really conjures up a lot of stuff that it's not in the Buddhist context.
Mm-hmm.
Empty, and my heart's empty, the glass is half, it's very negative. So you kind of got to, I don't know, explain more.
Yeah.
What is it you're talking about when you're talking about what is it empty of?
Mm-hmm.
For one. For two, I guess I always react a little bit when I hear somebody talk about getting rid of the self, getting rid of dualistic thinking. It doesn't take long to begin to demonize concepts and self and duality. And when you paint it red, you've got the devil. I think that's probably the... So I think for me, Chan and Zen are about the two truths and the equal and interaction of the relative and the absolute.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I certainly understand I gotta get rid of the self or transcend it or something. On the other hand,
Well, yeah, no, I don't.
Not be right.
Yeah, I don't, and maybe Chan agrees with you at a deeper level. I don't think Chan says you have to get rid of yourself. That's a kind of, I think there is a whole range of Buddhism that thinks that, but as I say over and over, Chan is anti-Buddhism. Let's see, and the first thing, empty, yeah, empty is, yeah, if you look at the history of the West trying to come to terms or think about Buddhism, they early on, maybe way up into the 50s, they would think about emptiness and nothingness, and it was, well, Buddhism is just this nihilistic disaster, but because they didn't know what empty really meant, or what nothing or nothingness really meant, and how it operated. And this is something I really spent my career working on, and that's the idea of seeing this whole Chinese way of thinking, this whole Chinese conceptual framework on its own terms, not through Western terms. And it's stunning how easily people, writers and thinkers, and have slipped into that like the dualisms, like imposing Western dualisms, even though they're kind of hidden onto Western or Eastern Chinese thinking. And that's like, so yeah, so you see empty and you only see it in this kind of English. That's not very good. That glass is half empty, or nothingness. That sounds terrible. But that's not what's going on in Chinese. And of course, the Chinese graphs don't have anything to do with those ideas that we have about emptiness. They're, one of my favorite is Su, which is, what is it? It's, it's in the image of mountains and sky and a tiger. So it's like this. I translate it as sort of something like mountain, tiger, sky, as a kind of emptiness. And so it's, it's completely life affirming in a really radical way.
So anyway, I think your intuition about that demonization of the self is there at some early level of I think Zen might have it more than we might think, and a lot of Buddhist practices might have it. But I think Chan very quickly wants to get past that. I mean, there are old Chan people who say, forget, don't meditate, don't, it's not a battle between this thinking self and transcendental emptiness or something. That's not what it's about. So,
Thanks.
yeah.
I'd like to go back to the Southwest. I'm thinking about the Chinese pictograph versus the petroglyph that's carved into the rock.
Yeah.
And the relationship between, a cairn that you might make and this very long-standing practice of having made a shape on a rock that's thousands of years old now.
The petroglyph, you mean?
The petroglyph is that, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I just think it's interesting to think about those two things and how they relate to each other. I don't know if you have any comment about that.
Yeah. Well, I like thinking about the petroglyph as beginning at the really primordial act of orientation. And wasn't language that way too? When we very first started, humans or proto-humans or whatever, started using language. It's if you think about it at a really fundamental level, it's sort of orientation, right? It's like finding your way in the world. And then in the physical form, for writing, it probably started, it did start as some kind of pictographic thing, of course. You make a picture of this thing you're thinking of or you're saying, like a tree or something. And you can, it's pretty sketchy, but if you go back, you can find connections from early Chinese pictographic writing, and you can see earlier and earlier versions of it that are more like petroglyphs. You might find them on cliffs. You can find. I have one book about that you can find scraps of them around on cliffs in China. Or I remember some of the really early things are what look like art, very simple art on pottery or bone or something, kind of a real early sort of Paleolithic art, and it looks like. And you can find where it starts blurring into what looks like a Chinese character, Chinese ideogram. So I think it does have its source there. And then the magic about Chinese is that it kept that pictographic dimension alive. All the way through, certainly in classical Chinese, people were aware of it. And then with modern, 50 years ago, they started dismantling. When they simplified characters, that wasn't so good for pictographic. That pictographic dimension started vanishing. But what was the other thing I was going to say? I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, it's a good.
So a couple more questions, but unfortunately we're out of time.
And one over there.
Sorry, I'd kind of like to get back to the very first thing that you read in the question period about presence and absence in visual art. I mean, you touched on it a little bit with Dan Weldon's paintings. But I'm kind of gravitating more towards this process of the blank page is like an absence, but it's also a presence.
Mm-hmm.
And making a mark on it is kind of affirming a presence, but it also affirms the absence that's around it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't read that article. I'd like to read that article, but anyway, if any of you want to talk a little bit more about that process, I'd be really interested.
Try reading Existence. The whole book is about that kind of stuff. And it just digs deeper and deeper into one Chinese painting, and which they might have out there. I don't know if they have it.
They might,
Yeah. Anyway, that's pretty insightful because, ancient Chinese were thinking about that. And they thought about, or calligraphers thought about, so you have a blank page, and that's like absence. But I could tell you what how absence works, maybe. But if they're operating where they want to operate, a calligrapher or painter, which is as the energy of the cosmos selflessly, you're always, so if you're operating as the energy of the cosmos, you're always operating at the origin moment. It is, this is like just suddenly it opens into all of Chinese philosophy. Yeah, because we think of time as this linear thing that goes from past to present and moves along, but ancient China and primal cultures, I think, time is more this burgeoning forth. It's a perpetual moment. And you want to be at that perpetual burgeoning forth. That's how you operate as the cosmos moving. Well, they thought painting practice, or even more calligraphy practice, but painting is almost an elaboration on calligraphy, because painting is built out of calligraphic strokes. They thought if you were in the right place, if you meditated and drunk some wine, that moment when you put that stroke is the origin moment. And then can you keep doing that? Every stroke at the origin moment, just as what you were saying. It's like you're back there with the ancients. Yeah. And yeah. Absence, so maybe I should say this, absence and presence, and this gets a little bit back to your thing, I think. Oh yeah, because absence sounds pretty negative too. Those are empty, nothing, absence. Pretty bleak world these people, those slanty-eyed Chinese have. No, absence for them means absence. There's two fundamental dimensions of the cosmos: absence and presence. Absence, and these are like there's a word for each one of these, ooh and yo. Absence is the tissue of the cosmos seen as one whole, right? We live in this world where it's all the individuation of the cosmos, right? All people and cities and a tree and a grass blade, all of this. But you could also see it as just one whole tissue. And that, if you see it as that whole tissue, it's constantly evolving. It's in constant transformation. It's taking different shapes. It takes the shape of a grass blade, and then that dissolves into a beetle, and then that dissolves into the ocean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see it. It isn't just, one way of describing it is absence is this pregnant emptiness, and out of that emptiness comes presence, the 10,000 things of the world. But it isn't like this metaphysical pool of emptiness. This is like a dualism, imposing a dualism on it. And then presence is this radically other thing. It's all just the tissue of the cosmos. So if you look at a painting, not that, like sort of, yeah, that, but if you look at a Chinese painting, I was telling you about how there's all this emptiness in a landscape painting, and the landscape, the mountains, seem to be emerging out of the emptiness. That's like presence emerging out of absence. And then it almost looks like they're on the verge of collapsing back into absence. That's why you can see the fundamental energy of the cosmos in a painting. And then calligraphers were doing the same thing. When you move as a calligrapher, it's the energy of the cosmos operating at that origin moment always, that place where absence is burgeoning into presence, where emptiness is burgeoning into the undifferentiated is burgeoning into the differentiated, formlessness into form. So it was all spiritual practice that way, calligraphy, painting, just like you were finding intuitively when you were trying to do that. Yeah. That might be too complicated. I don't know. It's hopeless.
I don't really understand, in addition to this, physics well enough to be able to express this as I'd like to. I probably wouldn't understand your answer, but the concept of potential is so important in physics.
Potential?
Yeah, potential energy, a potential state, having not being defined. Would that be a useful word when you're describing empty, or is that something else again?
Yeah, you could talk about absence as, potentiality. I use the word pregnant because I want to always keep this at this like earthly level. And that's the thing about Chan and Taoism that I think is lost in Zen and probably most Buddhism, is that it's, Buddhism came from India to China, and the Chinese had a real problem with it because it wasn't like essentially empirical. It wasn't earthy. And the Chinese are earthy. They had no metaphysics at all. It's just all earth. And that's what I so missed for so long in Zen before I dug into it myself and figured out, it's not transcendence, it's not emptiness, it's not nothing, it's all earth. And so I use pregnant, and but potentiality is good because that's what it is. It's this boundless potentiality. I mean, I love thinking about this tissue of the cosmos, and you think, well, if we, I think somewhere in existence, maybe at the beginning, I say, okay, we want to know what reality is like. Okay, forget everything you know. That is the reduction, the Husserlian, but more accurately and Cartesian reduction. Strip away everything you know, all the encyclopedic knowledge you know, all the beliefs, everything, and close your eyes. Strip all that stuff away, and then open your eyes and see what's there. What is it? And you open your eyes and you look, and the first thing is there's stuff. Why is there stuff? There might not have been stuff when I opened my eyes because I didn't know anything. And there it is. That's magical. Why? There's just stuff. Incredible. And then, there are mountains, there's the field, there's people, cities, everything. And then, if you sit there for 5 seconds or 5 months or 5 million years, you see this stuff doesn't hold still, it moves. It's always changing, always changing, always changing. It never holds still. And that's the magic of Taoism and Chan. What was I going to say about that? It's always moving. And the thing is, why? It's like gravity. You can't ask that. It's just the nature of the stuff that it always moves. Like for a physicist, you can't get an answer. Why is there gravity shaping the cosmos? That's also so fundamental you kind of can't ask. But this inherent nature of the existence tissue to keep moving and changing is just its inherent nature, and you can't ask why and you can't say why. It's just there. And that's what Taoism and Chan is about, is belonging to that. And that's just this earthly movement. It's spring. It's like right now. It's like the absence of the pregnant potentiality of the winter is now burgeoning forth into spring, and then there'll be flourishing in summer, and autumn it dies back into that empty potentiality. But the emptiness and death, of course, isn't empty and it's not dead. It's pregnant and full of life. So the absence and nothingness and emptiness are that potentiality of winter, like winter.
That was a beautiful way to conclude.
Thank you.
Yes.